So far we have always talked about the individual elements that make up your website, such as the fonts, the visual material, the videos, the vectors, the images, and so on and so forth, and also, of course, the Wix gadgets like the slideshows or the hover boxes, the light boxes, things like that. But we have never really, until now, talked about your website as a whole, because it's not just that the elements that you put in your website have to be consistent and have to create a style, a system, but the site itself has to do that also. And so in order to be able to show you what I mean by that, I have made 4 websites. Let me just scroll down and show them to you real quick, which all have the same exact visual material. They all have the same exact texts. They are actually tutorial sites that I made for my Project Studio design students, and I want to use these as an example of how to make sites that are that have the same content but that have very different visual styles. The first two, this one here and this one, are actually grid sites that were constructed out of strips that were divided into columns, and then the third one is made out of horizontal elements, strips again, and then the fourth one is a more traditional approach where I'm actually using the center of the page. So let's start taking a look at each of them one by one. So this is number 1. Let's see, let me scroll right up. So the first thing that I want to point out is that I have a background here. This is not a solid gray color. As you can see, it has a very slight texture. You can see that even better up here. And so the strips that I used, on some of them I placed overlays so that they become a little bit lighter, and sometimes they become a little bit darker. Let me find one that is a little bit lighter. No, I don't seem to have one on this one. I have one on the other one. And what I did with this site here is that I divided it exactly in the middle. So it's completely symmetrical. At the top we have the video header, which is divided into 4. So this is, if you think about the whole thing as 100, this is 25, 25, 25, 25, and then everything continues along that line. In some places the two 25s get joined into 150, but then we have 25, 25 here, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. Sorry, I should have been prepared and should have been on this page, but if I go here and make sure that you click on strip in order to be able to see that, I have 3 columns, and in this particular strip it's 25, 25 and 50. Okay, in some others it's different. In some others I have it in a different way. So for example, if I click here, it can be tricky to grab a hold of the strip. Let me just make sure that, oh, I keep getting the columns. Oops, no, this is, let me see, is this, no, this is the upper strip. Now I have it. Okay, so here I have the opposite thing. So I have 50 on this side and I have 25 and 25 on this side. Now this is a grid system, and these systems are very nice because you can actually use the entire browser width. So they are responsive in a way. Well, they're not really responsive in the proper sense of the word, but they are a fairly good second best. So I just minimize this to 1024, and if I do this, you will see that all of the text is visible. I can see all the text, no problem. So, but if I pop this out, this text is actually in a big box right here in the middle, and then this one is all the way on the left, this one is all the way on the right. But then if I pop it back down, then they all move location, and they all move in such a way that I can see all of the informational content on this site, even if I look at it, let's say, with a tablet. But then if I pop out, then on a nice big wide browser, which in my estimation this is how websites should always be viewed. They should never be viewed on little tablets and things like that, but that's just me. So that's the big advantage of using these grid systems, is that you are actually in a position where you can use the entire browser. And then also they give you a lot, because you can use the entire horizontal area, they give you a lot of empty space to play around with. Now, empty space, negative space, is a very important thing in graphic design, and the more we have of it, the better, because negative space is actually what allows us to read the text. If we don't have enough negative space, our eyes find it very difficult to actually concentrate on what it is that we have to read. So it's something quite important. And unfortunately, with websites, like for example here, I'm just going to go quickly over to the other version, one of the other versions I made. We don't have a lot of negative space because we are not using that grid system. So when we pop out, we get the content. It's in the middle here, but all this side area here and the side area here, unfortunately, has to get lost. We can't use it. It just stands there, and because of this. Because when we pop out, this is what we see. We don't see any more. Whereas when we have a system like this, I've just moved over to the other one now, and now let me pop out. I'm seeing everything. I'm seeing the whole text. But then, when I pop back to the correct size, to the full size, then I actually see that text inside very nice, big, empty areas of negative space. And that's the big advantage of using the strip columns inside Wix. Now, this does not necessarily mean that you would always be making a website with so little text. What I have designed here are microsites in which we don't need to have a lot of information. They are just there to give us an idea about what the site or what the company is all about. That's actually the owner of the of the site. But I have made another alternative to using columns, which is right here, where I have made, and there's a video for this as well, which you can watch. Here I am actually using a lot of text, but again I'm using it inside strip columns. So when I pop out, I just see the middle, but then when I pop back out, I see the whole thing. And again, this allows me to use a lot of negative space, like I'm doing here, or here, or here. Let's see, where else? Here. And then also, of course, I have these very neutral images surrounding it. So that's also another way that you can actually think about this. But in these particular cases, that is not what I did. I made sites with relatively little text, just things like headlines and subheads, and maybe very small entrance texts, because, like I said, this site is not really a site that is meant to give a lot of information. It's just meant to be about like a promotional site. Okay, so now this one is completely symmetrical. Like I said, here there's a version which is actually asymmetrical. It's unequal. This side of it and this side of it are not equal. This side is only 40 and this side is 60. Now, in some of them it changes, but so, okay, best way to do this is to actually go here and look at this thing in the editor. So now the way that this is actually working is that video strip that I have at the top here, the video header, here it is divided into 5. So 1, 2, that's 20, 20, 40, and then 1, 2, 3, that's 20, 20, 60. So we have 60 and 40. And the way that the columns are divided, so this one is working like this. Now let's take a look at this one. Here the column is actually divided into 3, but let me just look at this. Here what I have done is I have customized the proportions in such a way that they are 30, 30, and 40. So the 40 is the same, but this here is divided into 30, 30, which brings us to the total of 60. Here I have two full width strips, into which I placed images, and these have parallax scrolls, so when you scroll up and down they will actually show parts of it, which is a very, very nice effect. So then let's just come back here to look at this. So here again we have one which is 40-60 and another one which is 40-60, and then I have one which is, let me see, how did I do this one? Okay, so here I reversed it. I went 20, 20, 20, and then 40. Okay, so again the total is 100 obviously, but here I actually put the 60 on this side and then left the 40 over here. But here of course it's aligning perfectly, because 20 and 20 is 40, and this is 40 as well on the bottom, and then this other little piece of 20 gets left over here, and then we have this over here. And then the rest is pretty straightforward. It's just 40-60, 40-60 all the way down, and then all the way at the bottom we have the contact and the address and the social media stuff, and then we even have a little map for how to find him, how to locate him. So let's just go back here and let's look at this in a smaller format as well. So when we zoom out of this one, again we are seeing all of the text. The text does not get lost. The images get smaller, inevitably, or narrower I should say, but then we are still seeing something which is fairly acceptable, even though it's on a very, very small size now. But when we pop out, then we get the full thing, and then we also get a lot of negative space, which is what we want. We want negative space. That's very, very good for us. Now, in this, and then, of course, when we scroll down, let me also talk about that real quick. Now, obviously, I'm using the site fonts, which in this case I'm using Barlow, and I'm using different weights of Barlow, and this is hold on. I am not completely sure now. So this is Barlow semi-condensed thin. I think I'm using semi-condensed thin consistently here. In some places I have highlights, and I'm using them consistently as well. So if you look at them, I have the highlights everywhere. Let's see. I have all the headlines. So here are the headlines. So the first one is Eat Well, right here. The second one is Live Well, and I have this floating menu at the top, which is a very, very nice thing that you may want to think about using this as well in your work. Then we have Look Good, and then we have Right There, and all of them are in the same location. They're made with the same font. They are placed in the middle of this dark area here. So in terms of typography, I'm being consistent all the way across, and everything is aligned. So now I don't have any rulers here. I need to put one down to show you. So as you can see, aligned, 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 nothing changes. And that is of course a very, very important part of graphic design, is alignment, as I have talked about many, many different times. So that is another thing that you need to be super duper aware of when you are putting together a site like this. Again, to repeat, a site that is constructed out of a grid, that is constructed out of columns, is a really good thing to have, because it allows people to see it on very narrow browsers. It's kind of responsive. It's not really responsive. A responsive site is something different entirely, but it's a very good second best to a fully responsive site. So now we come to this one, where again we have this floating menu at the top, And here what I've done is I have put all the headlines inside these wide long areas, so they are all like that. So here's another one. Here's another one. I need to fix the height of my menu. It's in different locations on all of the stops, so I need to go back and fix that. That's an inconsistency, and that shouldn't be happening. So I need to look at that very quickly. Now with this one, this is a horizontal design. So we have the same header, we have the same video header, but then everything else is put on long horizontal strips. And when I look at it in full size, then no problem. I have a lot of negative space because of all these areas that I have here. And then also another thing, if you look here, now negative space, like I said before, that's a really important thing for graphic design. And on a website, on a classical website like this one here, where I'm only using the center and I'm not using the columns in the way that I was showing you just before on the grid versions, we really so let me just narrow down. So this is what we would be seeing if we were actually looking at this on a small scale. And let's see, let me just pop back out. The only way in which we can really create negative space on a website like this is by actually using the vertical. So it's these areas here, and that doesn't give us very much, but it's the best that we can do. So a good trick is to actually put different elements inside different areas. So like this headline is in a different area, this is in a different area, this is in a different area, and this is something that kind of makes up for the lack of negative space. So this is something that you may want to think about as well. Again, everything is perfectly aligned. The typography is consistent, so all the headlines are the same size, they're the same font, and I don't need to go into that at any great length. You already know what a stickler I am for that. And now let's just look at the final one, which when I go up here, I have a slideshow at the top. I no longer have that video header with I think it's 3 different slides. So on the first one I have the logo, but then I also have the icon of the logo up here, because I only see that full logo for a short while, so I just put this here. And then if we go down here, now the menu I have made exactly as wide as this area here. So if I just scroll down, and like if you look at the slideshow, it's exactly the same width. And this is a website where I thought, well, maybe this would not maybe even be a microsite, it could also be a full site, and then they would need more text. Now this is obviously dummy text. I just copy pasted this from a lorem ipsum generator. So this type of an approach would be good for a site that has more text and more information that they want to convey. It's more traditional, it's more conservative, but again, it will work as well. Now, again, I just want to go back to that because that's important, I think. Now, and then there's one more thing about this site, which I also want to point out. Now, this is also actually a grid because it is made out of 1, 2, and 3 sections, and the 2 sections on the sides are dark and the one in the center is light. And there's a reason why I made it like that, and I will show you very briefly what I was trying to do. So if I go to the web editor, what I did here is I temporarily made the background white, and I'm just going to undo that right away after I've shown you. But let's just preview this. I'm not going to publish it, and let's look at it with this pure white background. And as you can see, there is a difference here between this here and this here. Now here, when we have all of the stuff on this huge white background, then things are starting to sort of look lost. They don't really have a good place to sit. They don't really have a meaningful area in which they can be. because there's simply so much background. And that is why when I designed this site, I did not do it like that. I actually created a vertical grid system, and then I placed the content in the middle in a kind of like a contained area. So this is a self-contained area, as opposed to this here, which is like going from here to here all the way. Now, but this only really happens with this vertical format. When we look at the horizontal one here, when we go back to that, now this goes from edge to edge as well, but because it is confined from the top and the bottom, because there's a boundary here, and there's a boundary here, and a boundary here, then we don't have this problem that we have here. Because here we do have a problem, as you can see. Things are beginning to fly around. They don't get anchored. They don't really have a meaningful place to be in. And that doesn't happen here because we actually have self-contained areas into which we have placed all of this stuff. Now, a column, strip column based website can also have a lot of text, so you do not necessarily have to make a website like this, which runs down the middle, which is vertical, in order to be able to have a lot of text. You can also do that with, let me just go back here real quick, with something that is like this, where you have a lot of text, where I'm using the grid columns, the strip columns in a different way than what I'm doing here. Here I'm only using them for very little text and lots of negative space. So this would be either, like I said, it would either be a microsite, or it could also maybe be a home page for a big site. But here I'm actually using them in such a way that they would be used across the site. They would be used on all the pages, and then there's no reason why you should not have a website with lots and lots of text where you are using the strip columns as well. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.